Animals don't recognize kings, they don't care about armies, they don't understand weapons, but they understand threat. And something about Vikings triggered a response in animals that most other humans simply didn't. Not a trained response, not a learned one, a primal one. The kind that happens before conscious thought. Here's what's strange. Vikings were not the most violent people of their era, they weren't the largest army, they didn't have the most advanced weapons, and yet chronicles from Ireland to Byzantium describe a very specific kind of terror spreading through villages before the Vikings even arrived. Not just in the people, in the animals too. Horses bolting, dogs refusing to move, livestock scattering in directions that made no sense. So what was it exactly that these people were carrying with them? To answer that, you have to go back to the way Vikings actually understood animals, because they didn't see them the way we do. They weren't separate. They weren't below humans on some invisible hierarchy. They were channels. According to Norse belief, documented by researchers at the Museum of Cultural History at the University of Oslo, 5 animals in particular were seen as capable of transferring their qualities directly into a human being. The wolf taught warriors to thirst for blood. The bear gave power and raw strength. The wild boar removed fear entirely. The bird of prey granted vision beyond normal sight, and the serpent held the world itself together. These weren't metaphors, not to them. This was a practical framework, a technology, and certain warriors spent years training themselves to embody it. This is where it gets strange. The warriors known as berserkers, which most likely means bear shirt in Old Norse, weren't just men who fought aggressively. The Ynglinga saga describes them as men who became the animal, who went into battle as mad as dogs or wolves, bit their shields, and were as strong as bears or wild oxen. Most people read that and think it's exaggeration, dramatic saga writing, but here's the detail almost nobody talks about. They wore the animal, literally, bear pelts, wolf skins, boar hide, draped over their bodies before battle. And when an animal gets close to the fresh skin of a predator, especially one that's been worn, heated by a human body, mixed with sweat and blood, something measurable happens in its nervous system. The smell alone triggers a stress response. That's not mythology, that's biology. In controlled studies, researchers have documented that prey animals exposed to predator scent, even traces of predator scent on cloth or skin, show immediate behavioral changes. Elevated cortisol, increased heart rate, flight responses. The animal doesn't think about it, it doesn't decide, it just runs. Now imagine an entire raiding party approaching. A dozen men wearing bear and wolf pelts, sweating, screaming, some of them howling in tones. Researchers today still describe as genuinely non-human in quality. The horses at the edge of the settlement wouldn't need to see them. They'd already know something was wrong. But here's what shifts everything. It wasn't just the smell. The berserkers were also, according to multiple saga accounts and archaeological evidence, engaging in something more deliberate. Before battle, they performed extended rituals. Rhythmic chanting, movement designed to accelerate their own physiological state. Some researchers point to the discovery of henbane seeds, a potent psychoactive plant, in a Viking grave near Firkat, Denmark, as evidence that certain warriors may have been chemically inducing these states. The symptoms of henbane intoxication are specific: elevated aggression, insensitivity to pain, altered vocal patterns, hyperthermia, a sudden and dramatic rise in body temperature. When body temperature rises sharply, the body releases different compounds through the skin, different smell, and again, prey animals are exquisitely sensitive to chemical signals. Not because they're afraid of one individual, because they're responding to the collective signature of danger. Does that feel like coincidence to you? Or does it start to feel like something more calculated? There's another layer here that most accounts skip over entirely. Vikings didn't just wear animal skins. They studied animal behavior deeply. The Norse cosmological system, the mythology, was functionally a detailed behavioral map of the natural world. Odin's ravens, Hugin and Munin, were described as flying across the world each day, gathering information and returning with it. Translated literally, thought and memory. Vikings paid attention to birds the way modern militaries use drones. Ravens following a longship meant land was nearby. Ravens circling a ridge meant something had died there recently. Ravens gathering in unusual numbers before a battle were interpreted not as an omen but as data. Researchers note that seeing ravens over a battlefield was considered confirmation that Odin was present. But look at it differently. A warrior who understood that ravens aggregate around death would also understand that becoming death carrying its chemical and auditory signature would cause the ravens to aggregate around him and other animals to scatter. Now here's where it becomes uncomfortable. Modern neuroscience has a framework for what these warriors may have been activating in themselves. It's called the freeze-fight-flight cascade. Under extreme physiological stress, the human body undergoes changes that are neurologically indistinguishable from certain documented states of acute psychosis. Pain signals are suppressed, sensory perception narrows, the body routes all available resources toward threat elimination. People who survive extreme accidents often report feeling no pain, doing things physically impossible under normal conditions. The berserkers may not have been supernatural, they may have been operating at the edge of what human physiology actually permits, a state that other humans can recognize even when they can't name it. And animals don't need to name it. What if what animals were responding to wasn't the skins, wasn't the smell, but something more fundamental, the signature of a human body that has in some measurable way crossed back over the boundary between human and predator? That's not a comfortable thought. Some researchers believe the berserker tradition was eventually outlawed in 11th century Scandinavia precisely because it became impossible to control. Warriors who had entered these states attacked their own men, ignored commands. The fury that made them useful in assault made them ungovernable everywhere else. There are accounts of warriors who couldn't fully come back, who remained even in peacetime in a partial version of that altered state. The conventional explanation is that the practice died out with the Christianization of Scandinavia. That rational thought replaced shamanic ritual, but scholars at the University of Oslo have noted that the broader tradition of humans channeling animal characteristics through deliberate ritual predates the Viking Age entirely. It appears in the Iron Age, in older Scandinavian cultures, possibly going back further than written records can confirm, which raises a question that doesn't have a clean answer. Were the Vikings doing something new, or were they preserving something very old? Something that most civilizations eventually abandoned and that they, for a few centuries, chose not to. Either explanation leads somewhere strange. If it was performance, elaborate theater designed to exploit the biological responses of both humans and animals, then the Vikings had achieved something remarkable, a systematic psychological weapon that didn't require iron or fire. That worked before the battle started. That worked on creatures with no concept of culture or narrative. If it was something else, if the sustained rituals, the substances, the years of conditioning actually produced a measurable shift in human biology, then what was lost? When the tradition ended isn't entirely clear. What we know is this: for roughly 2 centuries, something about these warriors crossed a threshold that most humans don't reach, something that other humans fled from, something that animals fled from without understanding why. The animals didn't know what a Viking was, but their nervous systems responded as though they did. Either these warriors had reverse engineered the sensory language of the natural world, or the natural world recognized something in them that we've since forgotten how to see. Which possibility do you think is more likely? If questions like this actually interest you, the ones that sit right on the edge between history and something harder to name, you're probably not the kind of person who stops at the surface of things. Most people never get this far.